We do not yet know the full extent and the systemic and structural changes which will happen. However, we do know that global energy systems, food systems, and supply chains will be deeply affected.
That sounds pretty scary, especially from that Bond movie villain Klaus Schwab. Well, I guess he was right, though. Credit to him. Joining me now, my friend Bryan Dean Wright, of course, of the podcast I've been telling you about for a while, the President's Daily Brief. It's available every day at 6 a.m. Eastern. You want a little condensed, less than 20 minutes update on what's going on in the world? President's Daily Brief. All right, Bryan, I wake up today and I roll over before I even listen to your podcast, and I'm seeing these scary headlines about wheat shortages, specifically Asia. Let's start there. What's happening? Why does this matter?
Yep. So start with the fact that over 35% of the world gets its wheat from multiple places: United States, Canada, Russia, Ukraine, and a few others. But the point is, over a third of the people in this world rely on wheat for their food. And so what we're seeing right now, because of Russia and Ukraine and the war, a lot of the supply is lacking. So India, normally a big exporter to the world, unfortunately, they're having tremendous amounts of problems in terms of weather. They're not getting a crop this year, so they can't export to make up for all the loss that would have otherwise come from Russia and Ukraine. So for instance, they usually send wheat to a little country called Sri Lanka, just south of India itself. They are down about 40% from their wheat supplies. That's feeding riots, and indeed the prime minister of that country was thrown out because of it. So a big impact that we are seeing in places in Asia. Indonesia is another big place as well.
All right, Bryan, I'm sorry, you mentioned weather. Please tell me we don't have a drought coming on top of all the other problems we have contributing to this. Is there some kind of worldwide wheat drought?
Yeah, there sure is, unfortunately. So we've got a tremendous drought in Kenya. That's about a 40-year severe drought. So they are struggling to find another supply. They've gone to India, but India has actually implemented an export ban. So they don't want to send it out to other folks. They've got 1.4 billion people that they have to feed. There's some diplomatic wrangling between Kenya and India this morning, and indeed other places, but we'll see what happens with that. But here in the United States, we're facing some of those same drought issues too, particularly for our winter wheat, which we can get into in a moment.
Okay, before we get here on the domestic front, talk to me about Africa, Bryan. You mentioned a 40-year drought in Kenya. Now, I'm no weather climate expert, and I'm certainly not a wheat expert, but that seems like a long time to have poor conditions. Is there something else contributing to that?
Well, let me clarify. So it's the worst drought in 40 years. So they've had decent weather in the past, but this year is absolutely the worst. So apologies on that. But that's not the only place that has been impacted by this. Other places in the Horn of Africa has been as well. In addition, the country of Cameroon has been impacted by not only drought conditions, but the fact that they're down 60% from what they normally get in terms of their wheat supply. They get that from Ukraine. Well, obviously, they're not getting that this year. So that country, which is very poor, only makes about $65 each month, and an average citizen does. Well, that's a big, big problem. When you're losing 60% of your wheat, prices go up by about 50 to 60%. A lot of folks are going to start starving if not very, very careful.
Good grief. Okay, before we come here, let's talk about this starvation risk. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom, but I mean, we really seem to be on the brink of people, especially in these third world countries, starving to death. Are we going to see people starving to death, Bryan?
You know, the sad reality is yes. I think that you are seeing in the international community right now a recognition that is likely to happen. They're trying to raise a bunch of money and again give it out in loans and grants to these various poor countries. But the issue, bottom line, is that there's just not enough supply. You know, India's got this ban that other countries can't buy their wheat. Obviously, Ukraine isn't going to have much of a crop, and so there's just not enough supply. So prices go up. Doesn't matter if you've got a loan or a grant. If the wheat ain't there, you ain't buying it.
Don't miss Jesse Kelly Breaks History, Che Guevara, the latest episode of a new series available now exclusively for First TV supporters. Visit the First TV app or thefirsttv.com to subscribe and start watching today.